We have been asking ourselves for nearly a year, what happened to Melissa Casillas? A gunshot wound, a bullet passed through her skull, a firearm even found nearby, but here is the kicker. The medical examiner won't say if this was a murder, an accident, or something else. The official autopsy report has just been released, and we are going to break it all down for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We have been waiting. We have been watching. And finally, we have answers. Or do we? You'll remember we previously discussed the mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of Melissa Casillas, a wife, a mother, 54-year-old administrative assistant at one of the world's most sensitive national security labs, Los Alamos National Laboratory. She vanished in June of 2025, and almost a year later, hiker found her remains in a remote, desolate area of the Carson National Forest. And now, finally, the autopsy report has been released. A gunshot wound to the head, a bullet that traveled right through her skull, and a firearm found near her body. But this is where it gets complicated. The medical examiner has ruled her manner of death undetermined. So, not homicide, not by her own means, not an accident. I mean, at least for sure, it's undetermined. We don't know. That's about to open up a whole new chapter in this case because Melissa's family, they're not accepting this. They believe that she was killed. And they have evidence that they found that law enforcement apparently didn't find, which we're going to get into a little bit. But what is the autopsy actually?
The official autopsy report from the New Mexico office of the medical investigator reads like a riddle wrapped in a jurisdictional shrug.
This is from the Office of the Medical Investigator, and it says, quote, on May 28, 2026, Field Deputy Medical Investigator Christopher Martinez was contacted by New Mexico State Police about skeletal remains located on McGaffy Ridge in Taos County that had been discovered by a hiker. The hiker stopped to enjoy the view and noticed the remains on a rocky outcrop. The location of the remains was in a position that provided a view of the surrounding mountains. So, Daniel, let's start there. You got this hiker, just happened to stop, sees it. There's been a lot of questions about why these remains were discovered so long after she went missing. And in this particular location, what stands out to you about it?
Quote, the hiker stopped to enjoy the view and noticed the remains on a rocky outcrop. End quote. A woman vanishes from one of the most secure facilities on American soil. Nearly a year later, her skeleton is found posed against a stone as if seated there waiting. Not dumped, not scattered. Leaned back against a rock, facing the ridgeline. That image anchors this case. It suggests either a final moment of peace or a scene staged with precision. Before we go deeper, subscribe to the VerdictOrigin. We do not just cover the story. We follow the evidence. The family has one phrase they keep repeating. Evidence was left at the scene.
Listen, I don't know if the evidence, the physical evidence was found 10 feet away, 15 feet away from the body. But from my understanding is the family was told by the state entity, whether it be state police or whoever was the crime scene, the scene has been released. Here was the location of her body. You can go visit. And then while they were visiting, they were finding additional physical evidence. And that's incredibly disturbing to find that I would say traumatic to the family that they're finding not only additional physical evidence, but possibly body parts that they're recovering. But that calls in question as to the validity and the sanctity of the initial search team of how much effort did they put into it. I'm glad that the family brought in their own team, their own private investigator to look over this. And from, I've seen reports where, and where I've listened to him speak, where he's extremely experienced in this. And I'm glad he did this. He found this. But, I echo his statements of that is disturbing to find that you finding additional, and not just one or two or multiple pieces of physical evidence that are found on scene at a possible murder scene. You can compare this to other scenes of you would never just release a scene without completely, thoroughly reviewing the area and scouring the area. And I understand that it's physically very, very tolling for the team to hike up there with the equipment that they had to have. And I'm sure that they were exhausted. I'm sure that they were at their limits, but that doesn't excuse it. That doesn't, give you an excuse of missing physical evidence. They should have taken their time, gone it over, make sure the scene is secure, set up a perimeter, whether it be, a few hundred yards in each direction, and make sure that you have everything. And then once that's done, go over it again. Again, I've worked numerous evidence scenes on my cases and supporting other cases. You go over everything with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that you've got everything. This wasn't a little piece of fiber or things. This was significant evidence that
the New Mexico State Police processed a potential homicide site involving a woman tied to Los Alamos National Laboratory. They released that scene. Then, the family hired a private investigator. That investigator walked the same ground and found human bones. Not fibers, not shell casings, bones. The shafts of the left radius and ulna.
Make sense of it. Quote, the remains received on June 24, 2026 included the shafts of the left radius and ulna, shafts of 2 metacarpals, and a few small bone fragments. The remains recovered on July 2nd, 2026 included cervical vertebrae 2 to 5 and much of the left foot. Wow. And we also know that the family's attorney, that there was shredded paper, hair, clothing with possible blood, all of that recovered seemingly by the family's private search team.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is this is not just that piece of paper. There was physical evidence, bones. There was biological evidence, blood-stained clothing. There was clothing that could have gunshot residue on it, to show that, whether it was a piece of clothing on her leg that, will show gunshot residue. Everything is part of the picture that those investigators want to paint of that scene. Everything is part of the scene. And there's nothing that should have been discounted, especially bones, especially her body. Like I said, the trauma that her family must have suffered, seeing that there was still parts of her body left behind. And I would be unbelievably incensed at the New Mexico law enforcement authorities that conducted the search. I'd be furious as a family member, but then also as an experienced case agent, I would be furious at them for failing to collect all the evidence and taking their time to properly do it, and that my team was required to. So from here on out, the problem is this. And just like with anything else that we all do, if you run into a problem from here on out, how can you trust that everything's being done correctly? Okay, if you failed at something simple like picking up pieces of evidence, how are you knowing, you're making sure the detectives are doing everything? So I absolutely concur that the family have their own private team there, and hopefully that private detective is able to get access to some of the information, some of the evidence, that they can review it. Obviously, they won't get access to the files, but working as best as they can to make sure that this
cervical vertebrae 2 through 5, much of the left foot, blood, stained clothing, shredded paper with handwriting the sister recognized. A crime scene is not a garage sale. You do not walk through once and call it clean. Evidence was left at the scene. First time. Melissa Casillas was 54, administrative assistant at Los Alamos. Her husband worked at the same lab. On June 26, 2025, she dropped him off, then returned home because she forgot her badge. Her daughter saw her at 7:45 that morning. Later, the family found her purse, identification, and 2 phones. Both phones had been factory reset, wiped, not 1, 2. That is not a glitch. That is a deliberate act.
Right from the start, according to NBC News, your husband, Mark Casillas, who also worked at the lab, apparently told investigators that she dropped him off at the lab that morning and said that she was going to another location within the lab to complete a work task. The problem is, she apparently never made it there. Instead, she reportedly returned home after realizing she had forgotten her badge. Her daughter saw her that morning at around 7:45 a.m. Later that day, family members went to the house, found her purse, identification, cell phone still there. This is according to New Mexico State Police. And here's the thing that really stood out. 2 of her phones had reportedly been factory reset, meaning they were wiped. That same afternoon, June 26, 2025, a family acquaintance spotted Melissa walking eastbound on State Road 518. This was captured on security video from a local business. And that, as far as we know, was the last confirmed sighting of her. New Mexico State Police PIO Sergeant Ricardo Bracetta told Dateline she is observed walking eastbound on NM 518 and wearing the clothing she was last reported wearing in the Taos Plaza. It is difficult to tell if she appears distressed. And then nothing.
Later that same day, a family acquaintance spotted her walking eastbound on State Road 518, the last confirmed sighting, and then silence for 11 months. A hiker on May 28th of this year finds her remains on McGaffy Ridge. The medical examiner confirms identity through dental records. A handgun lies nearby.
You fast forward, you go to May 28th of this year. A hiker discovered human remains in the McGaffy Ridge area of the Carson National Forest. And according to New Mexico State Police, a handgun was found alongside those remains, which were skeletonized. The Office of the Medical Investigator positively identified the remains as that of Melissa Casillas via dental records. Now, you may remember in our last episode, we talked about some really troubling new developments. According to LA Magazine, the Casillas family hired their own search team who headed back to that remote area where her remains were found. And according to their attorney, they discovered items that had never been mentioned before. And this really stood out. Melissa's sister reportedly recognized her handwriting in these shredded papers that were found. So the question becomes, how was this evidence not uncovered sooner? What does it mean for the investigation?
The gun was registered to her husband, but the manner of death is undetermined. Not homicide, not suicide, not an accident. Undetermined. The medical examiner could not tell you how a woman with a bullet through her skull died. Let that sit. The bullet entered the right cranial base, traveled inferior to superior, and exited through the temporal bone. Former FBI agents have noted this is an unusual trajectory for a self-inflicted wound. Most people put a gun under the chin or to the forehead. This angle rose from behind and below.
The actual cause of death. So here's what the report says about the trauma. Quote, there is projectile trauma to the cranium. The projectile entered the cranial base from the right side, damaging the left anterior side of C1 and the left side of the foramen magnum. The angle of entry was from right to left, inferior to superior, and slightly posterior to anterior. The projectile passed through the left petrous portion and exited the cranium through the squamous portion of the temporal bone. Okay, can you walk us through what's significant about this? Because again, what we're trying to determine is what happened to her. And we don't have a manner of death, right? They listed, the medical examiner couldn't determine if this was homicide, suicide, accident, even though appears to be a gunshot wound and the firearm is nearby. What do you make of this? I mean, what should we be understanding about what they determined here?
Well, there's a lot of questions as to the direction and the round of the travel, that it moves and how this would have conducted. But one has to think about it is when you're trying to be, if someone is suicidal, someone wants to take their life and they're conducting a self-inflicted gunshot wound, what is the two most likely that you're going to see? Either put it in under your chin, in your mouth, or sometimes your forehead. I think that this angle is awkward enough to me to saying, listen, this is where I conduct my investigations. I conduct my investigations as to looking at all possibilities, but the most likely is the direction I'm going. This right here is not a normal path for a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It wouldn't be normal. Is it impossible? No, it's not impossible. But for me, so then I would be leaning in the direction of that this is a homicide because of the direction of travel, the entry, the movement of the bullet. Again, someone will be committing suicide. They're just distraught. All they're going to do is put it under their chin like they see in the movies or they read in the books. So those are the things that would be most likely. If I saw the round here or if I saw the round here in my head, then I'd be like, okay, that would lead me in that direction. But this right here, the description of how the bullet entry and exited, hitting part of C1, the upper spine, I think this all would lead me as the investigator in the direction of that this would be, appears to be a homicide, that someone killed her. And then that would begin the reasoning as to why. So we need to figure out motives, who is likely. You have family, coworkers, things that maybe it was a random individual and she was just sitting there, lying there, and a random individual came up and randomly killed her. That's even a possibility there. But then you would say, okay, why is the revolt, the gun there? Would a killer really be that? So there's lots of questions, and with the failure of answers to these questions, you're going to have lots of theories and have conversations just like this. And until New Mexico law enforcement authorities really get into the meat and potatoes of the investigation and figure out what's going on, with the lack of information, that you're going to find a lot more questions. But here's the thing: is with it not being considered a suicide by the medical examiner, law enforcement in New Mexico has to move forward that it is possibly a homicide. So hopefully they are putting weight behind it and saying, okay, this could be a homicide investigation, and they're not just discounting and saying, okay, it's suicide.
Is suicide impossible? No. Is it normal? No. The cause of death is a gunshot wound. The manner of death is a shrug, not closure, an open loop. Now the national security angle. A woman who worked at Los Alamos is dead. Her phones were wiped. Her remains were found in a remote forest near a firearm. Her family, not law enforcement, recovered critical evidence after the official search team left. So ask the ticking clock question. If the state cannot secure one crime scene, what are the odds they can protect a facility that holds the country's most sensitive nuclear secrets?
Do you think this puts pressure on them to continue the investigation? Should they make a formal announcement? We're continuing this investigation. I feel like they have to, given how much attention
there's too many. Listen, if you have just the body, again, that would be suspicious to me. I would have moving forward. The fact that you have the additional suspicion of the phones being wiped, her being seen walking on the road, not in her normal, day-to-day life that she would. Something happened where it deviated, whether she was told to deviate or she self-deviated. There's something there, which means is without those clear answers, the law enforcement entities cannot say definitively that it was suicide. They have to go in the assumption this is possibly a homicide. And that's absolutely the way they should be moving forward.
This is bigger than one family's grief. It is about whether the systems we trust to investigate death can see what is in front of them. If they cannot see bones on a ridgeline, they cannot see anything. Evidence was left at the scene. Second time, the family issued a statement. Correct. They do not believe Melissa took her own life. Those who knew her know how deeply she loved her daughter. She would not willingly leave her behind. That is not forensic proof. It is context. And when you stack that against the wiped phones, the gun registered to her husband, the bullet trajectory, and the evidence the state missed, Undetermined starts to look less like caution and more like avoidance.
Somebody might say, how's it possible, right? How's it possible they can't determine this? Well, I want to read again from the report directly. It says, given the state of the body's advanced decomposition and paucity of information available at the time of the writing of this report regarding the circumstances of her death, the manner of death is certified as undetermined. Now, something to mention, the family hired their own search team. They found evidence that law enforcement apparently missed. So I want to read you this from the autopsy report. Quote, on June 24th, 2026, I received an infant body bag from FDMI Martinez at the OMI front desk. FDMI Martinez and NMSP agent Mata had gone to the office of an attorney in Albuquerque who had received additional remains from a private detective in Taos who had searched the scene after the recovery team had left. So the family search team apparently found this additional potential evidence that was turned over to the medical examiner weeks after the initial discovery. A few things here. One, so now you're talking about the decomposition, how it might limit your understanding of what happened to Melissa. But at the same time, it seems concerning that there was evidence found at a crime scene or potential crime scene after law enforcement had already left, no?
Let us be precise about what the autopsy report actually confirms.
I got there. Quote, the skeletal remains were leaned back against stone in a depression in rocks with the left tibia, fibula, shoe, and sock approximately 20 feet away. There was a firearm near the body. FDMI Martinez noted that the left hand and left foot were absent And also notice the remains appeared to show signs of predation. Okay, so there's a question now, obviously. Why do you have missing body parts? Is it possible that animals, scavengers in the area did something? Or is the missing body part somehow connected to her death in some way? Or the cover-up of her death in some way? Because you also find the firearm near the body. What stands out to you?
I think that for me, the most when conducting an investigation, I go with what's the most logical, and I work off of that. I don't discount anything else, but I would say the most logical is that an animal probably took away small body parts, and that's the foot is also 20 feet away. That to me, I would lend that to be the direction of most likely is an animal took her body parts, and was eating it or whatever, because this body had been gone for almost a year, so no one had seen it, and it was severely decomposed, almost to the point of where there was almost no skin or barely anything for the medical examiner to determine if there was gunshot residue on her hand. There's nothing for them to test to see if it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And the fact that the gun is still there, again, that's great, but without the projectile, which apparently was not located in her skull. So where is the projectile? So this is where the investigators should have gone back out there and tested and gone and conducted a grid search. Listen, you're looking for a small single round. It's going to be very difficult to find it, but at least that would be able to match the bullet to the gun. Without that bullet, without the round, you can't say that gun was the murder weapon or the suicide weapon, or however you want to call it.
The remains were skeletonized. The left hand and left foot were absent. Some of that is predation. Animals scatter small bones. That is natural. But the report also notes that the remains were leaned back against stone in a depression in rocks. The left tibia and fibula were 20 feet away. A body exposed for a year in that terrain will be disturbed. But the position of the torso suggests something else. Either she sat there and died, or someone placed her there.
Listen, there's a lot that just doesn't make sense about this case. And, the positioning of the body, the location of the body. From what I understand, this is an extremely, extremely remote area of the park where it is not like right off the road. So supposedly that one of her last sightings of this woman was seen walking on the New Mexico roads there, and she had a backpack. And then all of a sudden she's now found in this remote area. I understand that she was an experienced hiker, experienced hunter, but it's still just, there's so many questions. And that's the problem right there. When there's so many questions, that lack of filling in the blanks leads to other questions, conspiracy theories. So, and the fact that there are other missing scientists from the area and the government, there's just a lot of questions that I have surrounding this.
Does it make you think that it's possible someone dropped off her remains, that she was killed or died somewhere else, and that the remains were transported there and left there? Because that's a theory that's come up.
A body does not naturally fold itself into a seated position against a rock face and stay that way through decomposition.
This is not possible. You can't say this isn't going to. So anything is possible as far as whether somebody brought her. But based on how it's described that you just read, it seems like she was sat up there in this position, not her body dumped. If somebody was, and the fact that you have appears to be a bullet entry hole in her lower rear head and the exit in the top of her head. Again, the conclusion was that it appears to be a bullet that killed her, but the manner, whether it's homicide, suicide, that was inconclusive. So is it possible that someone brought her there and placed her there? That's a long way to carry a body. That's a long way to carry, just to put it in a remote location. A lot of people that if you're going to conduct a homicide, it's dump the body or bury it in a shallow grave because you want to get it, get rid of the evidence quickly. And if somebody wanted to murder her, and they're not going to transport her dead body all the way across, this area from the nearest point. I hope the investigators, from what we've understood, the initial evidence response team left a lot of evidence behind, which was discovered by a private investigator, and then they turned that additional evidence over. So it seems to me that the team, the crime scene, team that came out from New Mexico State Police really didn't do a good job. So it also tends me to believe that maybe they didn't look and see if there was somebody who tracked it in. I know it's been over a year, but still there could be physical evidence that the individual leaves when bringing in a body. So to answer your question in a long way, I think that she probably died there, in that place.
Someone chose that spot. That question remains open. What is not open is this. The New Mexico State Police released a scene that still contained human remains and biological evidence. The family found what the state missed. Chain of custody is broken. Future prosecution is compromised. In a case involving a national security employee, a wiped phone, and a bullet trajectory that defies easy explanation, that failure is the story. Evidence was left at the scene. Third time. That phrase will define this case. Now read one document yourself. The Office of the Medical Investigator report for Melissa Casillas, case number 2026-03492. Pull up the section titled Additional Remains Received. Then read Manner of Death. Ask yourself one question in the comments. How does a certified medical examiner look at a bullet wound through the skull, a gun nearby, 2 wiped phones, and still rule the manner of death undetermined? Not because evidence was absent, because it was never collected in time. I will wait for your answer. If this breakdown matters to you, share it. Like this video. Subscribe to the VerdictOrigin. Turn on notifications. We do not speculate. We follow the evidence. And the evidence is still out there.